The title of this video may come across with a lot of exaggeration, but I kind of want to save that later for this video. But to be very brief about it, I went and watched Emilia Perez. Now, I didn't go to the cinema to watch this movie. I watched it on Netflix in the comfort of my home. Now, the reason I went ahead and watched this movie is because this was a movie that has received, a lot of nominations. So far, it's received 13 nominations at the Oscars. And the only last movie to receive a ton of nominations was Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King, which received 11. By the way, at that time, it won all 11 awards as well. So, this is like a record that has been completely broken. And obviously, the critics have been very much lauding Emilia Perez. But somehow, the audience has a very different view to this film. Like, a very divided view that this is some of the most abominable trash or just a completely horrible film. And I could say through the conscience of me watching the movie and kind of putting my own perspective into it, this movie is really bad. Not only is it just really bad, but it's also unwatchably bad. Now, my term with really calling movies bad, I've seen so many bad movies, even on this channel, and even before, I started, making videos, I've seen, a heap of bad films. But this movie is, bad, unwatchably bad, that you can't really, put yourself through this film. For whatever the film tries to do, it doesn't achieve anything. Even my recent movie, I went and saw Flight Risk, which was a awful film, but at least it was watchably awful. You can actually sit through and watch a movie in the cinema, and then you come home, you know how disappointed you are watching it, which is how I felt about that movie. But Emilia Perez, however, is really different. I feel like my view of watching it, it tries to do so many things as a movie, as either a comedy to a thriller to a musical, but just fails at everything. A movie that really just doesn't do anything good at all. Now, I'm really gonna lose my mind talking about this movie because it is just unbelievable how a product like this exists as a film, and just how awful it does at anything it does. I'm gonna kind of repeat it quite a lot, but there's a lot of things wrong with this movie. Obviously, those are the elements that's wrong with this movie, and it's also got quite a lot of controversy around it. Now, I'm gonna kind of save the controversy near the end of this video. That I'm gonna kind of just talk about it a little bit, but I want to just talk about the film as I talk about first. So I'm going to talk about the main sort of story about this film. So the movie centers around a Mexican cartel leader, and essentially he tries to talk to a lawyer who's been recognized for winning a case, and the Mexican cartel leader tries to do a phone call to the lawyer, who's played by Zoe Saldana, and it basically makes her an offer. And essentially when they meet, he expresses that he wants to go through gender reassignment surgery and just transition into a woman to essentially live back a different life. And he's also got a wife with children, and essentially since his transition is kind of led to fractions of their relationship as well that happen. So that's kind of really the main story that I've got from this movie. Now, I think the concept as a story like that, I think it's fine. I don't really think there's really going to be much things wrong with that. But I really feel like this movie has really no message to it. And it really lacks any sort of real sort of story development, actually trying to relate to the characters. And I'm also going to have to make a big criticism about the musical, because my God, the musical is so awful. The songwriting is actually really, really awful. Some of the worst pieces of songwriting I've seen ever. Some of the lyrics are just actually terrible. There was this one scene when the lawyer goes to Thailand to meet doctors who do all these sort of gender reassignment surgeries, and They talk, and some of the lyrics is like man to woman, to woman to man, to penis to vagina. Like I'm kind of like butchering the lyrics a little bit in some way, but those are like some of the main things that were stuck in my head listening to that song. And then all of a sudden there was like another scene when the cartel leader does his transition to a woman, and I don't really know. I'm not really good with like understanding pronouns here, but all of a sudden it talks to its son, and the son tries to make a song like trying to recognize, he sees his father essentially. So, and then he starts saying that you smell like Coca-Cola with lemon and ice. So like there is like really awful songwriting with the musicals, and they don't add anything to this movie. I'm just gonna really say that. But I think the story, like as a movie, it's just doesn't really work for the production and also for the script that they were given for these actors. I really think they make zero substance to actually make it work, and I really think it just dilutes itself with so much dialogue that and so much scenes that everything just kind of just falls apart at that point. But my whole takeaway from watching this movie is really just how boring this movie is. Like really, really just such a struggle to watch this film. There's no real retention to gain from this movie. I really struggled to really pinpoint like any real moments that have any interest. And none of the acting performances really helped themselves either. Like Zoe Saldana's performance never really helped. I mean, even Selena Gomez, who plays as the cartel leader's wife with the kids as well, she doesn't really have much to go for. Like there was only like one scene of like real focus I've seen that where she does her own musical of some kind, and by the way, not good and necessary for the movie at all. I'm just gonna say that. But there's no real like standout performances from any of the actors, and even like the nominations like for the actor or actress, the trans woman who's also nominated for this for being best actress as well, which I'm gonna kind of discuss later. He doesn't do anything either. Like I mean, I don't even know. Like I can't even use the right pronouns to even describe the individual, but it doesn't do anything to make his performance recognized either. I really struggle with the whole nomination side of things. Like, what is this movie really good for the awards? And I think in a lot of ways, I really do kind of question the real message of or the real importance of these awards. Like, actually, what does it really matter? Like, what people think about your views of good quality films and entertainment if you're just being bombarded by irrelevant people in Hollywood or critics that are somehow just trying to somehow think that this is somehow some sort of masterpiece to come out and shows real importance in society. Now, I do want to kind of touch onto the controversy side of things of this movie. One of the first ones is the cultural representation of this movie and the use of stereotypes. They do play with the stereotypes quite a lot of portraying Mexicans, like, the hats and the mustaches. Also, they also use the lyrics to describe Mexico as well, which doesn't work very well. And also the use of like cartels and gangs and stuff like that. I think they do try and portray Mexico in a very negative light, and I can see why this movie would be very heavily criticized by Mexico. Now, I'm not gonna really like try and throw like this movie in terms of it being racist and stuff like that. I have heard that being used quite a bit, but I do think like if you're kind of portraying a country in a very negative way, which this movie I think does, then I can see why that term would be used, like why people would criticize this movie for racism. Again, I'm not gonna kind of hit my opinion on it because I don't want to kind of touch into this sort of stuff and make accusations, but I do kind of see the criticism for it. Now, there was also criticism thrown around like also the depiction of trans people, because obviously they use a trans person in this movie and they try to use their character as someone who is trying to hide away from committing crimes and just thinking now all of a sudden they could just live a normal life separate from that, making that transition to a woman. Now, I do think that could be deemed sensitive, although, again, I don't really want to kind of throw a lot of the controversy in the way of you guys, or really kind of bring these sort of opinions a lot, because it can touch very sensitive sort of discussions. But I think the way they kind of, make those sort of depictions as well, like the use of trans people, and also earlier, as I mentioned, about Mexican culture as well, I do think it is presented in a pretty negative way. Now, I think, again, like I said earlier, I think the idea of a story like this, if it was actually produced better, directed better, and actually had a better script to actually go upon, and actually maybe it could have been focused on something to make it work. I think they could have had something to actually go with, but it didn't do any of that. And I think all you got in is just something that really just bashes cultures and also genders and representation in such a way that I just think everything about this movie's message is just non-existent at that point. Also, another criticism for this movie as well that's also been receiving some controversy is also the lack of Mexican actors for this movie. And they say the reason is because there's a lack of Mexican talent or local talent to take part in this film. But I just really disagree. I mean, I don't really know why a statement like that would ever come out. Now, I'm going to kind of give my reasons for it, which I think will be very obvious. Because I think if a Mexican actor or actress would take part in this movie, they would be offended and probably very upset with it, knowing the direction it was going. So I think they just kind of wanted to just sort of gaslight this movie representing Mexican culture and cultural accuracy or representation in a way that is not really sort of being researched very well and is lacking so much depth to it, that if you actually were to put someone who is Mexican in this movie and it's not being represented in a positive way, they're most likely going to be upset. So I think this movie was just portrayed very negatively, and I think the casting director would have known that, and I think that's the reason why they didn't decide to do that. But that's just really my opinion. But yeah, Emilia Perez is a lot to unpack as a film. My general view of this movie, it's really awful, and I think from everything from what I've seen, and also the whole view of how this movie is being received negatively with the whole controversy as well, and just as a movie on its own, just how awful it attempts to do at everything it tries to unpack, I do look at this movie as genuinely one of the worst films I've seen. And that's a statement very rarely I would ever make, because I've seen so many bad movies, and I don't know where I would pick like one of these movies as one of the worst films I have watched. But I do look at Emilia Perez as being one of them. And these 13 nominations at the Oscars, I don't really know where it's come from. And I really do question like the people who pick these nominations at these awards, or the Hollywood elites, anyone. Just like, where's this coming from? But yeah, just shows that, these awards and these ceremonies have no relevance or meaning these days. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see like how these nominations really turn out when the Oscars does come around. But anyways, I think as a movie on its own, like even if you watch it, I just find it very difficult that you could really unpack anything good about it. But anyways, I'll leave that thoughts up to you guys, what you think of Emilia Perez. So put your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. Dislike if you want to dislike. Thank you for watching. And yeah, that's about it. See you later.